Hello, this is Mike at Gamefromscratch, and welcome to another episode in the ongoing Closer Look at Game Engine series. Now, the Closer Look at series is a combination of a review and a getting started guide to hopefully in less than an hour, even a half an hour, try to give you as much information as I can about a game engine so you can make a decision if this looks like the right kind of game engine for you. I've done this for a number of game engines in the past. Generally, I do them both in text and video formats. There is a text version of this one. I will link it down below. And today what we're looking at is the QICI game engine, as you've probably guessed from the scrolling graphic in the background. QICI game engine is one of those rare gems. I am pretty well aware of most engines going on in the world of game development, and a lot of times something new comes along and I look at it and I go, oh, that's cool. That is going to be a very useful tool. Now, the number of times I've run into a game engine from day one and went, holy crap, that's awesome, and it's usable now, I can count them on one hand. The last one that really knocked my socks off was probably the Godot engine. And truth of the matter is, it was in use in-house for 5 or 6 years. They just kind of released it for our usage. So there was years and years gestating here. Whereas this is a brand new game engine released the end of last year. And it is, spoiler alert, really good. It's built over top of Phaser. Now, Phaser is probably my favorite HTML5 game library. I won't quite call it an engine. It falls into that kind of middle ground, so it's a framework. It provides all the functionality of a game engine, but not the game engine part. It goes a little bit closer though, because there is the basics of a scene graph and game flows in there, but there's no level editor and stuff like that. So basically you would still build your game and part of your game engine on top of it. Well, QICI is built over top of Phaser. Now we're talking about HTML5 game engines here in case you didn't know. And what QICI does is provides tooling and a component entity system, but it's all over top of Phaser. So when you start off with one of my favorite libraries underneath, you've already got me in your camp. When you do a very good job of it, that gets even better. So this is Phaser, and this is the technology that powers QICI. So the core is solid. Now, Phaser itself is built on a renderer called QICI. Now, there's a lovely thing about the JavaScript world is there's a lot of component reuse, which is a good thing. There's a lot of libraries that work on other libraries, etc., and they all benefit. So when QICI development, the renderer gets faster, and in turn gets incorporated into Phaser, which in turn will get incorporated in QICI, and we all benefit for it. So you can see some really nice reuse working in the world of HTML5 development. So today, it's QICI that we're looking at. And as I said, it came out the end of last year and it's built over top of Phaser and it's surprisingly good. Now let's jump into the why part. Now first off, in order to run QICI, you actually need to have Node installed. Oh, I knew I forgot to load something. Node is available from nodejs.org and it is pretty much all the hotness in client side or server side running of JavaScript. Basically, it's a JavaScript virtual machine and set of libraries for running JavaScript code somewhat natively. So a lot of people use it for server side, basically writing servers in JavaScript that run inside of the Node interpreter. Well, essentially QICI is an HTML5 game engine that runs inside of Node. It gives it access to your file system and allows it to run a lot more like a native application. So if you're unfamiliar with Node, you should probably get familiar with it. It is a very popular technology these days. Just run the installer and you're good to go. So that is the one dependency we have in order to run QICI. But otherwise, to get started, just go to the downloads folder. It's kind of weird that they've done this, but basically it's hosted on GitHub. And I guess I should mention that as well. QICI is completely free and available under MIT license. Now the code itself, though, is not hosted on GitHub. Instead, you come here and you will get where did they go? Binary. So basically you download the version that you wish and it comes down as a zip file. And then you go and you run that file. So basically just get that file down. Let's go to that folder. Why are you pausing? I bet you any money that Windows Defender, yep, God, I hate you, anti-malware service executable. I'll wait for Windows Defender to stop being a stupid little prat, and we should be able to continue on. Do you remember the time where Microsoft Security Essentials was actually really awesome? it's not that time anymore, and unfortunately I can't kill it, and you can't disable it anymore. All right, 1 second. I can temporarily disable it, but unfortunately it's not going to stop that scan. All right, I think we're good to go anyways. So that has nothing to do with the engine and everything to do with Windows Defender sucking completely. So once you've got it downloaded, like here, take this zip and just extract that zip out to wherever you want to run the game engine from. I've already actually downloaded it and installed it. So if we go here, you'll see QICI engine is there. Now, I'll take that guy. Generally, all you need to, actually, you know what, I won't even open a command prompt. You just need to, depending on if you're on the Mac or on, what did I say, Mac? Okay, if you're on a Mac or you're on a Windows machine, depends on which one you want to run. On a Windows machine, run start.win.bat. On Mac, start-mac.command. Or if you're on a Linux box, it's a very, very trivial file that's being run here. It's just basically passing in a JS file to the node version. So just run that command otherwise. And I shall run this. And you'll notice it runs in a browser. Like so, they could probably host it in an app controller. There are packages for making Node into bona fide apps. Well, that would just basically get rid of the browser window aspect. But here it is. This is your basic project management scene. And don't worry, things are going to get a lot more impressive. The initial project management screen is not the prettiest stuff they've done here, but let's just go ahead and create a new one. You pick a directory for it. Give it a unique name. So I'll go with QICI YouTube demo, like so. Click OK, and click Create. And here is the main editor. Again, this is running entirely in HTML5, and amazingly enough, this actually works in an iPad, on your mobile phone, etc. So this is one of the few game engine editors out there that works completely cross-platform and on mobile, etc. So that is really cool. But your interface is pretty straightforward. Like over here, you have your editing surface for basically composing your scenes. Here you have your hierarchy or your scene graph. Here you have your assets, the various components that go into your scene. I'm sorry, the font is extremely, I don't know if it supports this. I'll try zooming it up a bit. Yeah, it does. Okay. If that's coming across exceptionally blurry, I apologize. It's because I'm running at my non-native resolution. I'm running this at 1920p so I can record it. So on your end, it should not look fuzzy. If the video is making this text look fuzzy, it isn't actually. That's my computer doing that. So anyways, again, you have your assets that come here, and then finally you have your inspector. So if you've worked in any component-based engine, such as Unity, I guess is the big one, the inspector is a dynamic properties kind of view. It's the same thing that Visual Studio has been doing for 15 years. It's become kind of the standard norm. It's a dynamically sourced kind of form based off what the current selection is. And this is your interface. Now you can also switch it out to go landscape if you prefer, like so. And you can also have it set for pre-configured for certain devices. Now, weird thing here is it's all iOS devices for the default, but it doesn't really matter. You can switch and resize things to your heart's content. So it doesn't really particularly matter what you take. Now, you'll notice our UI is really big because of presentation, just because I zoomed it up. It does not normally look like this. So you pick whatever size you want to work for, and it sizes here appropriately. Now I'm going to switch on back to portrait. And another aspect here is you've got a choice between, I believe that's Chinese UI and English. I'm assuming a simplified Chinese, but I don't actually know for sure. So if I'm wrong there, I apologize. But as you saw, the UI is very responsive, and when you're actually working with it, like if I go over here to the editing surface and right, oh, there's nothing there. If I come over here, say to the project area and right click, you see I get an actual context menu. If I do something I don't like and do a Control Z, it undoes it. So it has a very desktop-like experience. In addition, there's also drag and drop. So it feels like using a desktop application. It does not feel like using an HTML5 application. And my apologies to HTML5 applications, but your user experience generally sucks. And this one doesn't. So that is quite sweet. They did a very good job of making this feel. If it wasn't for this right here, so if I actually ran this full screen, for example, you would not probably even know you were running an application. It does that good of a job. So pretty much you create scenes. So let's create one. create a new scene. Let's go ahead and save our scene. We'll call this my scene. Scene was saved. Now you notice if you come here under states, it's got my scene. Now if you come from a phaser background, being named a state will make sense. If you don't worry about it. It's one of those things. Just think of a state as a scene as a state, or a menu as a state, or basically it's an entity, or it's a, you break your logic up into chunks, be it windows, be it levels, be it game modes, etc. And those are essentially states. So that's why your scenes end up over here in a category called state. Simple enough. Now, your state basically is built up of nodes. Now, generally what the common thing to do these days is just to make a top level one called entity and start adding components to it. They took a slightly different approach here. They went a little bit the old school in their approach, and they used a bunch of predefined ones. Now, you can still just create an empty node and add components to it and end up with the same result, but you've got some predefined ones as well. And the nice thing you'll see here is there's also a good set of UI components here too, which is very nice. So you can easily create hierarchies and fairly complex UIs simply. Now I'm going to start off with just a simple sprite. So you bring it in and you've got your manipulators. Why am I moving the manipulator? All right, let's do a Control Z to undo that. Like so. So you've got your standard manipulator, so you can confine your movement to a single axis, like so. You've also got a scale one for scaling across individual axes, like so. And then you have a freeform scale, like so. So those are your manipulators. Now what I don't understand, and this is one of those ineffable things, is there's no rotate. And I had no idea why there's no rotate. It does not make any sense to me, because you can come over here, and this is actually, I guess, a good time to show you. Here's the inspector window in action. So now that we actually have an entity, so we have a node of type sprite. A sprite is composed of sprite and a transform component, like you can see here. You can click here and expand down, and you also see that there's QC.sprite is the container. It's got a transform component and it's got a sprite component. You can expand them, etc. And if we look in here, there's a rotation value. So I could sit here and rotate 90 degrees, or 45 degrees, or 0 degrees. So you can still do rotation. So why there isn't a rotate operator up here, I don't know. It's one of those ineffable things. So it's such a polished thing, missing such a basic functionality. I don't get that. But now that we're over here looking at the inspector, you'll also notice at the bottom here, we can add a new component. And the components, here's another one of those things with their UI that's a little strange, is you can also add, and you can only specifically add other components, such as a script component, using another mechanism. So their approach to components is also a little bit strange, and this one of those things, very minimal work they could tweak and make the workflow a little bit nicer. But you'll see here, there's some base components like UI components, tweening components, and debug components out of the box. Now the next thing that we'll go ahead and show, and I think this is actually where their business model comes in, because this is a completely free MIT licensed engine. So how are they making money, or are they making money? And as of yet, I don't think they are, but you'll notice up here that there's a plugins, and there's a plugin manager to start. And here's where you can add additional functionality. We're going to come back and do this in a second. But first I'll show you, there's also this plugin store. So I think that's how they're going to leverage and make money off this thing. It's sort of like the phaser approach now, where there are some premium models available. You know, a Box 2D physics integration, for example, is an add-on, and you pay additional money for it. I think they're going to take that general approach with this game engine as well, which, to be honest, I think that's a very good way to monetize their system. They give you a heck of a lot for free, so if they want to start selling plugins down the road, works for me. And they haven't hidden any of the major core functionality, you know, behind a paywall. So it's an approach that, if that's where they're going, kudos to them. It makes sense to me. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add arcade physics as a plugin, and then you got to do a save and a reload, so it adds into our scene, and poof, here we are. So we now have arcade physics available. So I'm going to click here. So we got our sprite available. And I'm actually going to go ahead and give the sprite an image. So we could actually attach an external image, but I'm just going to go ahead and use one of their, I'll use circle. There we go. So now we've got the arcade physics library from Phaser now available to us. So we're going to add a component, and you'll see now there's this plugins, arcade, rigid body. And with the rigid body now attached, the component has a bunch more settings here. So example, you know, the mask, you can make it a static object by turning immovable on, collide with the world bounds, etc. And then your major physics operations here, like gravity, friction, angular velocity, etc. And what we're going to do is just turn on gravity. So gravity along the y-axis, set it to 10 units. Like so. So that is done. And now you'll see up here, there's a preview and pause buttons here. So you can preview your scene. And there is your sprite with gravity applied. So we can head on back, stop the preview, and let's jack that up a lot. So make that 100, and go ahead and press play, and we move faster. So as you see, there is this nice, again, Unity style preview system built in. And another thing that is inherited from Unity here is if I have this guy selected and I press this, actually, you know what, just a sec. I'll grab this guy, I'll turn gravity back off, like so. I'll come back here and press play. All right, so now we're in play mode with our sprite. I'll select our sprite, and now what you can do is live editing to see how things will work for you. So let's try 5, and you'll see we immediately start moving. And I go to 54, for example, and we immediately start going. So you can play with the values live. Now again, like Unity, and this is very confusing for many people, myself included, if you're in play mode, let's go back to our sprite, you'll see that the settings are not persistent. So when you're in play mode, you can tweak set values, etc., but it is not permanent. So as soon as playing is done, that is taken out. Again, Unity takes that approach. I don't know if I like it or not, but it is a pretty common approach to take. And essentially, this is it. It's this game engine built over top of a really cool game engine, and the tooling is awesome. It just works. It's straightforward. It's simple. It runs brilliantly. It works exactly as you would expect it to. Your assets are pretty straightforward. You can come in here and go, for example, let's bring in a texture. We could open the underlying file system location. I guess I should show you this anyways. And we could just drop a folder in, no problem, and handle it. So here is what it's built for us. So you can see it builds up a hierarchy for you. Here's where your scripts will ultimately end up. Here is your loader program. Pretty straightforward. The hierarchy is rather intuitive. And as I said, you can just drop assets in. Here exactly as you wish them. There's some advanced stuff you can do, such as bring in a sequence of images with the atlas at prefix, and it will automatically build a sprite atlas out of it. There's functionality for that. A sprite atlas is basically a sprite sheet. There's tools in here for creating web fonts or doing frames of animation, but we can also hit there and go import assets, and then, for example, let me just go to my desktop. I could grab these 3 frames of animation and drop them in and import that. And now you will see, all right, not entirely certain what it just did there. Why did you just grab one? It got just the one. I'm not sure what went wrong there. It should have grabbed them all. But it brought in and created us. Basically, your input files can be brought in via drag and drop as well. Or, like I said earlier, I could just take these files directly and go back to our assets folder. Oops. Say texture, and just do a paste, and you'll see they are automatically processed. There's a file listener working in the background that is checking for new files to be dropped in. So now if I come here and look in texture, you will see them available there. We can then, I believe we can direct instance by dragging and dropping over, like so, and now it has automatically created us, brought it in as a UI image, which is probably not what you would end up wanting to do. You could have done it as a sprite now, and we could take the sprite, set its frame to, oh no, it's not done that way. It is done via the texture. And there we go. We're using a sprite instead. Sure, I'll remove that node. I don't know if I mentioned this already, but if we move something like so, I can undo it. So nice. I believe there is a redo as well. I don't know. Ooh, no. All right. Control R is the hotkey for reload your browser, so that's not good. But yeah, so assets are easy to bring in, or you can work directly with the underlying file system, or you can use it right here in the application. The only thing I haven't really covered yet is coding. Coding is probably the weak point in their documentation and the sole spot where they screwed up. Not that it's hard, it's just not intuitive, at least not initially. There should be, and I don't get this, here's my asset, I have it selected here. Oh, I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna cover one thing and then we'll get back to coding, sorry. No, I'll continue my thought, never mind, sorry. So I've got my asset here selected. I should be able to just go to the bottom here, go add component, script, and pick my script. I don't know why that's not hooked up. It's a big loss on their end, one of the few mistakes they've made. QICI, if you're listening, add that functionality and it will make a lot more sense. But as it stands now, the script is hooked up a slightly different way. You come in here and you go to this guy and you just click new JavaScript file. Now, before I segue back to new JavaScript file, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to delete this. Actually, delete both of these. So our node is pretty empty. And now what I'm going to do is show you some of the UI functionality. So go back to game object, and we're going to add a UI root. This is like a container for your UI. Various settings you can do over here, like the dimensions of it. And then what we're going to do is parent a UI control to it. So with the UI selected, we can right-click and do a create. And I'm going to show you some of the functionality that's available in here. For example, text. So we added a text control. We'll make it really big, and there you can see is our text. And text is composed of a transform, a UI text component, and then the UI text component, you can do a number of settings. For example, well, is our text, set our text accordingly, like so. We can change the font. Actually, I'll just go back to system though. You can change the font to a different font. I will font size up to 46. Align middle. We'll make the color red. But you get an idea. The editors here are pretty comprehensive. So we're good to go. Click OK. Oh, that's stroke. All right, never mind. So I always screw that up. Actual color is here. Make that red. There you go. So that is the components. The components, again, can have another component attached. But with this UI root, I will actually show an example of that. Game object, for example, will have button. So add a button to our UI root, like so. So now I have a button, and we'll put the button here. We will jack up the font size so we can actually see it in this display anyways. So a button is composed of a text control on a button control. So let's grab our text control, scroll down to our text. So you can set the button here, but all I'm going to do is jack up the font. And make it a little bit bigger so the, oops, there's the downside. I have to go select the parent, make it bigger. There. So you get a nice hierarchy of controls, very common approach these days. It works, I guess that's why everyone's doing it. So now we've got a button in our hierarchy, so if I was to move around the root, everything underneath it would follow. If I move around the button, the text that's attached to the button will follow, etc. So now let's look at, with having this button, let's add some logic to it. And all code inherits from the same base class, and it's a very straightforward way of doing things. So as I said earlier, a new JavaScript file, we'll call it button handler. And ta-da. All right, so just created buttonhandler.js. And if we click on it in Inspector, it gives us a code preview with markup, etc. If we look at the underlying code structure, we'll now see in our scripts folder, there is a JS file created for us. And that is how you add code to the engine, and you attach said code to the component via, select it here, drag it there. So click and assign. Oh, sorry, went too far. And assign it here. Ooh, I assigned it to the text. Oops. Let's just get rid of that. Take it here and assign it to the button. There. So now our button has a qc.engine.buttonhandler script attached to it. And if we go here and double click, there is a built-in editor. Of course, you're probably going to be doing this on a consistent basis. You're going to probably use an editor or a text editor along Sublime Text, WebStorm, Atom, Visual Studio Code, whatever your preferred editor is. But quick and dirty, there is this nice editor, simple editor built in. It has code folding, it has syntax highlighting, and it has real-time error evaluation. Unfortunately, it does not have IntelliSense, which is sadly missing. But this is the heart of the programming model. So basically, every script is attached via their top-level namespace is QC dot. And what you do is defining a behavior. So we're creating a new QC.behavior and passing it in. So that's it. So all things are defined by calling QC behavior. This basically hooks up a script to a component. And the script itself has the game object passed to it, as we will see in a second. So I'm going to take this guy right here. What was I thinking? Oh yeah, sorry, one last thing to talk about, but the key thing to be aware of here is there's this series of methods that it's got predefined that basically they come from, I believe the base class is Node, but the system lifestyle contains a number of methods: update, render, on awake, which is for create. I'm not coming up with all of them, but basically all of the different parts of your program lifecycle. So each cycle through the game loop, there's a bunch of different calls that can potentially be called at different states. Those are all available, and you just override them like it's showing here. So if you wanted to handle updates, you get called per frame, you would implement the method just like that. So that's how you add lifecycle functionality to your thing. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and hook up and connect to our button. So we're going to do a very quick and simple, and undo that slightly. So one of the actual methods available is onClick. And in onClick, we're going to go ahead and just do click, like so. So code is saved. Why are you erroring on me? Unmatched brace brackets. Oh, yeah. So those errors actually help you, as you saw here. So created our code. Now this is one area I have found it's a little flunky, is sometimes I have to come in here and go reload scene to get the code changes to hook up and actually propagate. But now we have that code wired up. You will see if I select the button in our hierarchy, it has it available right here. Go ahead and run our game, click the button, and there you go. You see the events being triggered. So that is basically how you hook up the code. Now on top of that, you can actually propagate out the code to the editor. I'll show you that very quickly. Let's see, where does scope begin? Right here. So I will go as this dot meaning of life equals 42. And down here, I will add meaning of life equals qc.serializer.int. Oh, no, int, I think. So basically you're telling it, oh, sorry, not equal, type, what this type is, and to serialize it over to the editor. If I did not screw anything up, in theory, I did screw something up. It's probably the syntax here. 1 second. Yeah, I just can't type, so we want the spelled correctly version of serializer, like so. Go ahead and save that. And now, if we, are we in run mode? Yeah, let's turn run mode off. If we select our button, there we go. You will now see we have a new value we can configure and set from the editor side of things. So exposing variables out of your code back to the QICI editor, dog simple. So nice integration there, and that is essentially how you hook up code to components, vice versa. There's a lot more to it, obviously, but I'm not going into that here. Now the next thing is, this is all built on top of, oh no, the next thing is actually to show you how this hierarchy works. So we hooked the component up, but we haven't actually done anything. So our component here that we hooked up to is a button, but it's got this text attached to it. How do we go ahead and actually do stuff with our button? Well, this is done via, so this, pun not intended, so this is our behavior object. Contains a method called GameObject, which in turn contains actually this. So this .game object will be return basically a button, a type button. Now button has a child control called text, as we see here. So we're basically saying from our game object, find the child game object named text. There's other ways you can do it. You can do it by index, etc. But in this case, we're just doing a find by name. So you'll notice here, if I come down here and select text, it has a value field named name that we're using to find it by. So we're going to find .text, and text has a property or called text. Button clicked like so, and close that line off. So that is how you access the game object that a script is attached to and its children. So I'll go ahead and save that in theory. All right, go to run mode, click the button, and you will see it changed. So that is how the two are hooked up together. Now finally, the last thing I want to cover here is the phaser integration. Phaser is behind the scenes, and it's still there. So if you've got your code and you want to access phaser, it is there. So it's attached to your game object. So you'll know phaser is all exposed through an object called phaser, called like that, and it has something called game, for example. So you can do game.add, etc. So phaser is exposed. If you're a phaser programmer, you can get at it this way. This is still 100% a phaser project. It's just a little bit behind the scenes for you, and you can still use all the phaser methods you know and love from today. And that's it. That's all I'm going to cover about QICI coding, editor, etc. If this looked interesting to you, do let me know if you want more coverage on this. It's interesting to me, so I would love to do a getting started, a 5, 6, 7 part kind of tutorial series on this. If you have interest in it, let me know. Now finally, before I move on or finish this up, I want to cover a little bit on the materials that ship with it. So I'm not just excited about this because it's a polished, nice editor built on top of a game engine I love. It's also very well documented. Like extremely well documented. For a brand new project, this staggers me. We have, let's see, close you down. There's the examples project available on GitHub, and it has a number of different projects to get started from based off categories. There's probably a total of 60 or 70 examples to work from. So it's definitely examples to work out of, but where it gets really impressive, I'm on bookmark bar. We have this documentation, which is a complete reference. So this is your API reference. It is searchable on demand. So I can come up here and say I am looking for, all right, click there, brings up search field. I am looking for things with the word game or etc. And it narrows it down. I'm looking for key. So there is a great reference material. The reference material actually has text in it that makes sense. So it is a well documented in terms of reference material. And on top of that, we have this guy, which is their basically their wiki or their getting started guide or their non-reference documentation basically. And as you will see, it is very comprehensive. And when you get into things, it is very well documented. So for a brand new project, this has, I think I can basically say, the best documentation I have ever seen for a day one project. Very good job there. Unfortunately, there is a bit of a negative. Let me just bring up the QICI website. The community does not exist. Ooh. Change you to www. It basically is this, which is an Ask forum with about 6 questions. So no community as of yet. Hopefully that grows in time. On the bright side, there is HTML5gamedevs.com, which is the kind of resource for phaser, etc., especially for English speakers anyways. So I would see a community forming up there, no problem. Or you could probably piggyback the existing phaser community for now. I don't think they will mind, and they will probably answer, because I imagine there's going to be a whole lot of overlap between QICI users and phaser users. So that's it. That is a closer look at QICI, and you can tell I'm actually a bit more excited than I generally am. Part of that, of course, is that I've had 4 coffees, but a big part is this is a great engine. For something that just came out, this is staggeringly mature. I'm very impressed. There are no downsides. It's built on top of a great engine. It's completely open source, MIT licensed. It works well. It's stable. You name it. I'm trying to think of some I mentioned a couple of usability negatives while I was working on it. It'd be nice to see, say, Cordova build support built in there, but for the most part, this is 99% there. It is a great thing. If you are a Phaser developer, you should have checked this out already. If not, you should be hanging up right now. Go check it out. If you're an HTML5 developer, you should go check this out. If you're curious about HTML5 development, you should go check this out. Frankly, you should just go check this out. So this is the QICI. It's a MIT licensed HTML5 game engine built on top of Phaser, and it is great. Check it out. Hope you enjoyed that. See you later. Bye.